Brendon Kleen, welcome back, my friend. It's good to see you. It's good to have you back from across the pond. Cold open question for you. Travis Scott is just at the Iowa game, and you pointed out before we started recording that very well could have just been the first time he's ever stepped foot in Iowa. I don't think Travis Scott's like out here like going to the Iowa caucuses or going to watch Kirk Ferentz and the Iowa Hawkeyes play football at any point in time. But I ask you this, is there like can you think of like a celebrity showing up at a random like NBA arena or like basketball game that you would like to see just because it would be so weird? Because like the Knicks get all these celebrities that it's just like if you're in New York or you're one of the New York celebrities that live in New York, you just go. Or like Ethan Hawke is like a regular Brooklyn Nets games, which like troubling for Ethan Hawke that he's watching a lot of Brooklyn Nets basketball right now, unfortunately for him. But is there like a version of this where you're like, oh, Travis Scott's at an Iowa women's game to see Caitlin Clark? Is there like a funnier celebrity or more random combination we could think of here?
Well, you get any of the like Midwestern or Middle American teams and anybody showing up starts to be a little funny. And I even say this as somebody living in Phoenix, which a lot of celebrities kind of like quietly live in or spend time in but don't claim. So we did a segment when Emma Stone came, and that was like the biggest news outside of the Kevin Durant trade of 2023 at Footprint Center here in Phoenix. So anybody showing up at a lot of these places would qualify, although taking a picture with, the guy who made Goosebumps and Lisa Bluter is certainly more obscure even than that. The person that came to mind to attend like, let's say like an Atlanta Hawks game or something was Bob Dylan. Mm-hmm. That felt the most like fish out of water to me. Would just be if like Bob Dylan all of a sudden was just like dapping up like Quinn Snyder pregame,
him and
or
Two
like
Chainz
just somehow he just knew DeJounte Murray. That would feel similar. But that's still not
Bob
really
Dylan,
getting us to Travis Scott, Lisa Bluter territory, personally.
Yeah, but like Bob Dylan going to a Hawks game and then like it's like spotted post game in Magic City with Trae Young or something would get us there. That's kind of the energy.
There's the Adele, Rich Paul clutch. We're kind of like starting to do the degrees of separation that would be required to maybe get Bob Dylan kind of in the room. I don't know if Adele and Bob are like that, but it's close. I could see it at least.
Yeah, it's really got to just be like a random market. It's really like who's the most famous person we can get to like a Fever game this summer is probably my answer, honestly.
Pat McAfee. No, that's happening honestly, game one. That's not obscure. We got to just get ready for that one.
That's a lock. I absolutely expect to see a man who... Did you, by the way, you may have seen this. You were on vacation, though, but your beat at Awful Announcing just being muted. Did you see Pat McAfee basically just admit he's, like, taking steroids? Did you see this quote where he's like, I couldn't do WWE right now because of all the pharmaceuticals in my body? Just a king.
No, but if you watch the glow up he's had over the past couple years, it would not shock you. Like, just go look up, like, Google Pat McAfee 2021 or something, and kind of answers itself, I think. The man is not 25 anymore,
Yeah, my answer to this is just like when we in the summer, I'm driving to this game, so I want to will this into existence and I get to see this in person. The Sudeikis McAfee Caitlin Clark like photo post game. That's what I'm going to will into existence here. Just like, how did we end up here? What happened? What Bob Dylan at a Hawks game is great though, or Bob Dylan at a Rockets game.
Sure.
Just one of those. Sign me up. All right, coming up on today's show, a round of what matters more due to NBA injuries. There's a lot of them. Caitlin Clark, how high can she take things in the rest of 2024? And are the Boston Celtics just staring us in the face as the best team in the league, as the favorite to win it all? That's all coming up today on the Just Basketball Show. Welcome into the Just Basketball Show for March 5th. I am Chris Manning. That is Brendon Kleen. If you haven't already, please subscribe, rate, and review on your podcast app platform of choice. Hit subscribe on YouTube as well, notification bell to get notified for all of the latest here. Find us on TikTok, Instagram, all those great places as well. I want to tell you about our friends at Thrive Fantasy 2. Thrive Fantasy is a player prop DFS platform where we can pick more or less on your favorite players across multiple sports, including the NBA and the NFL. Sign up today with our code JustBasketball and Thrive will match your first deposit up to $250. Again, Caitlin Clark coming later, which is the real headline to me of this show. But we're going to start with what matters more in the NBA, Brendan. A litany of NBA injuries and injury updates in one specific case right now. Let's run through them. Devin Booker out 7 to 10 days with a right ankle sprain. Hoping, for my sake, he is healthy by next week when it's NBA paint night for Cavs Suns. Very excited about NBA paint night. Russell Westbrook is out indefinitely with a broken left hand, inserting Bones Highland back into the lineup for the Clippers, among other things. Jalen Brunson, who I just assumed whose knee exploded during Cavs-Knicks, apparently just has a knee contusion, is already listed as questionable for the Knicks game on Tuesday, and decided that he didn't want to play after the contusion. Played less than a minute in that game, but apparently he seems okay. Scottie Barnes is out indefinitely after breaking the middle finger on his left hand. Joel Embiid says he, quote, hopes to return this season. And the latest news is that Donovan Mitchell has undergone a PRP injection into his left knee due to a bone bruise in that knee and will miss at least the next 3 games after missing the previous 2 for Cleveland. So, Brendan, a lot of injury news there. What's the most important one?
So I put this list together for us, and I almost wanted to just have it separated out ahead of time, but I'll do it now. The Joel Embiid thing has to be kind of in its own category, right? Like, that's clearly the answer here if we're just sort of zooming to the 30,000-foot view of all of this, because whether he plays this season has way more significant impact than any of these other things, just because it's literally like a yes or no question rather than a how long and all that. And if the Sixers don't get him, their chances are just toast. Starts to ripple into how they operate this summer and how do they handle him in the future and his career and legacy. Like, this is the biggest one.
Well, and even on top of that, like, when he returns and what that means for where they're going to end up in the standings is like half of this. It's like, obviously, just where do they end up, but also, does he come back in time where he can prevent them from falling into the play-in? And or is like the door open for Miami or someone to get into the top 6, and Philly then has to like be in the play-in tournament and maybe gets like Milwaukee in round 1 or the Celtics in round 1 or something. Like, there's just so much depending on like when he returns and when he looks like.
Having him need to come back and like win a single elimination game is not ideal from a
if he's playing
point, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably a little bit more manageable if it's like Brooklyn versus like one of the teams out west, but your point is correct.
All right, so that one being its own thing, I guess my other answer would be actually Russell Westbrook.
Yeah, I agree.
Because obviously, out indefinitely is bad, but that doesn't always mean forever. That just means we don't know yet. But the Clippers, it's like a miracle that they turned Amir Coffey into like trustworthy depth, but they're not exactly the deepest team at this point because of the Harden trade and some of the moves that they've made over the past couple of years. So they don't have anything close to a replacement for Westbrook in terms of style and just the change of pace and athleticism that he provided and the wild card that he gave them. Bones Highland is a different kind of wild card, but there's a reason he wasn't playing. They have the Bones Highland type of wild card in a bunch of different versions on their team already. They don't need a scoring guard. They do kind of need a turnover creating, transition scoring, smart passing vet, and without him, they're a pretty different team, I would say, and their small ball stuff gets harder or whatever. So even if it's just down the stretch as they try to push for a top seed in the West, I think that's pretty significant to not have Russ.
Yeah, he's really, Brendan, I think, and it's been well documented, I think, but he has just found his role with that team, and he's been so additive to that team in a way he never was with the Lakers, right? Like, it is the version of Russ that I think everyone kind of wondered if he could tap into being a more of a role guy at this point of his career, and he absolutely is. He's playing, like 22 minutes a game. He's not playing a ton. He's coming off the bench. He still doesn't shoot threes well, but I feel like he's additive in terms of his relentlessness, his pace, his effort, the demeanor, the energy he's kind of creating off of Kawhi and Paul George. It's really useful, I think, for that team to have a guy like him whose motor just constantly is running hot when, like, as good as Kawhi is, as good as Paul George is, as good as Harden can be, like, those guys are not guys you describe as energizing star players. Like, they are very methodical, they are very calculated, they are very patient in how they want to play. Russ is not that. Russ is the chaos bringer of that group. You can't, and even if, I agree to your point about like Highland and leading scoring, but like there's not even anyone I think on the roster that you could put in and say, okay, can you play with that energy? Even if the outcome is a little bit different in terms of its function, Russ is, you can't even really match the energy he's providing you. So, and I agree. And if he's not, indefinitely is obviously, it's undefined by the definition of the word. You would hope that if he could be back by the playoffs, or at least like sometime in the playoffs, you think this is ultimately fine. But this hanging over them right now, particularly as they're battling for seeding within the West, it's absolutely a big deal. It's the one that has the high. Russ's injury, of the ones we discussed, has the longest run, and it's also the most important one just as far as standings go. Because as of right now, the Clippers are in the 4 seed, and they're slipping a little bit behind the rest of the pack among the top 4 in the West right now.
Yeah, I guess to hit on the Knicks, because that feels like the other one. I said before we recorded that it's not exactly it's just a hypothetical that sort of saved their season, but the turn from Brunson is missing, even if it had been 2 weeks, a month, coming back for the playoffs, to a day or two and beating the Cavs in the game that he pretty much already has now missed a full game with that injury, was a huge shift for them. And to compound their luck or fortune, I guess, with regard to that, it sounds like Anunoby, Robinson, and Randall, they're all traveling with the team on this upcoming road trip and are all in some kind of rhythm toward coming back. And for that to be happening on March 4th is really, really good. So that's kind of not the point of the game we're playing here, but I guess to highlight the New York injury situation in general, they're probably the team I would circle on this list that, I guess, what hasn't happened or the being saved from it matters a whole lot, because they seem like they're headed toward full health, or as close as this weird Knicks team can ever get to full health by the time of the playoffs, and being the kind of threat we thought they would be maybe the day they traded for OG Anunoby, which we just haven't really seen since they got hit by the injury bug right away after that.
Yeah, the East playoffs are going to be fun if this Knicks team can stay healthy, get everyone back, and Brunson avoiding a real injury is just obviously huge to that. The other one I wanted to shout out, like, all due respect to Brennan, our respective markets, the Brunson and Mitchell things feel a little bit like shorter term things. Obviously, both teams
Booker
kind of in.
Mitchell.
Yeah, Booker Mitchell. Excuse me. What did I say?
You said Brunson again, but we're good.
I'm just thinking about Jalen. Curious. I'm excited for him to break the news of his injury breakdown on his podcast that I'm sure I will see in an Instagram clip, even though I don't follow that account. Very sure that's where this is going to end up. Booker and Mitchell, we'll see how long these injuries linger, but it feels like they're shorter term injuries and they'll be back maybe next week. Both teams obviously kind of need to just win games. The Cavs are a little bit of a funk right now. The Suns are in the play-in tournament right now. Both these teams just kind of need these guys to be stable and be normal, but you would think they'd be back sooner. The other one I wanted to look at was just Toronto, because they just feel like they very much could just kind of bottom out here. But what is the purpose of that? I don't remember the protections or if there are any, because their pick goes to the Spurs. What's the point of them bottoming out? Is this just really more ammo for the Spurs to ultimately do something cool around Victor Wembanyama on the draft, and either draft 2 interesting prospects or trade one of those picks or do something really ambitious to go get Wemby some help? Because Vic is coming right now. He is ascending right now and is really, really great right now.
So
that's the other one to me.
The pick protection there is top 6, and it's currently at 7. So
yeah,
it may behoove the the Raptors to go ahead and bottom out, you know?
Yeah, and like even if you don't think this is like the best draft, and I think the consensus on this draft class is that it's not the strongest class of players, I do think Toronto keeping its pick and would be good for them. I think this team clearly needs to add some young talent in some way. I think they're still very much in the acclimation phase of building here around Scottie. And yes, would you have liked more reps for Scottie as a lead option in the first year with a new head coach and post all the trades you made? Sure, I think optimally you would. You'd prefer the court time over anything else. But if you could keep your pick out of this and maybe there's someone you like or there's a trade you can make, that's not the worst thing in the world, I think, for Toronto. So that to me is almost the bigger implication one, just because it's the lasting implications of that are going to last a while. It's not just, hey, what does this mean for standings over the next week? It's, okay, what does this mean for Toronto's roster building, and could the Spurs get some kind of benefit here, or do they just kind of understand their future when they're getting another first-round pick via Toronto coming? Because of
and their situation is already so weird with all the trades just kind of blowing up their roster, and Grimes is out, and it's just probably headed toward this is going to be one of those teams that has a bunch of guys you've never heard of the first week of April in their lineup, and that's fine. And yeah, it's not a great draft, but the Raptors don't like to be bad. So the idea that they're going to be, try to keep their pick as a San Antonio pick this year so that they can get up in the draft next year, like, they're not a team that tanks like that. So they're just going to draft, which they tend to do well, wherever they get their pick this year, assuming that this allows them to maybe keep it, and probably try to kind of rejigger things and be ready to go and chase 35 wins or whatever again next year. So it's definitely significant because it means maybe the difference between a team getting a great young player and not. And it's not going to affect the playoff race, but it might be one we look back on that's pretty big in the future. And hopefully, I guess, it would have been nice to see Scottie get some more reps. I think, to me, I want to see Scottie get more reps on a roster that suits him better. So I'm not saying, get rid of Jakob Poeltl and all that, but let's just go into October of next year with a Scottie Barnes roster, which I'm still not fully sure this one really is that. So maybe this is kind of a blessing in disguise to just reset things and tank and move on. Say goodbye to 2023-24 as the trade season in Toronto and move on from it.
Yeah, not quite as bad vibes radiating off of this as the Tampa Raptor season, but it's been a weird, funky Raptors. You're not a good, charming, quirky Raptors way that we've seen. It's more of just a lot of blah the whole way. A lot of blah, and the coach getting really mad, throwing pizza parties. Can I just say, actually, real quick, pizza parties, Brendan. I understand the logic behind this. I think when you're an adult and your obsessive boss starts bringing up pizza parties and are we gonna do sticker charts? Are we children? Can we just what are we doing?
I don't know. It's funny though, because I think because he is historic and whatnot as a European coach, people think that Darko Rajakovic might be some kind of quirky Raptors hire, to the point of a quirky Raptors season that you just made. The guy is very well respected and has been around the NBA for a long time. So it's kind of funny that almost he does seem so off the beaten path, because he was an assistant with the Thunder when Kevin Durant still played for Oklahoma City. The guy has walked the walk. So I believe him as a coach, even if he called Scottie Barnes a face of the league and got really into pizza,
Yeah, just I think if you're above, if you've moved out, if you're not in college anymore, I think pizza parties just feel demeaning. That's my take.
Calling it that is, I think, really where the issue
is.
Having pizza at a party is a universal experience. There's no really
but
age
a pizza
limit there.
But a pizza
to
party
to call any kind of party a blank party, I think there's really, it kind of time runs out on that. I would say way sooner than college. I would say maybe middle school. So,
Yeah.
pro athlete, I think you're past middle school typically for that. So just say we ordered pizza. It doesn't have to have a name because that makes it weird.
We went out to like a nice pizza. We went out to like a nice pizzeria, like adults, and like had it's not like whatever the Canadian Little Caesars is. Like I'm just kind of imagining they just crushing like $5 Canadian Little Caesars, and just like everyone had stomach aches the next day. Unfortunately, all right, we're gonna talk about Caitlin Clark after this. I want to tell you about our friends at Homage. Brennan's so glad he's back from me saying nonsense. Homage is an ultra-comfortable specialty apparel company with NBA and WNBA licenses that use vintage-inspired designs to pay homage to the greatest stories, traditions, and figures across sports, music, and popular culture. Use our link below to make your purchase and support the Just Basketball Show. They just restocked the MLB starter jackets. Boy, it's taken a lot of self-control for me not to just immediately pull the trigger on the Guardians one. And by the way, check out our friends of the Just Baseball show. Just had Stephen Kwan and Tanner Bybee on from the Cleveland Guardians. So go check out that interview with those guys. It's pretty darn great. And shout out to Homage. Use our link below. Again, buy yourself for someone you care about something nice. Get a Jimmy Butler t-shirt because I think the Heat apparently might just always just be around doing stuff. So
get a Fever t-shirt.
Yeah, Indiana Fever t-shirt. It's gonna be great. I mean, Brendan, when we partnered with Homage in the first place, I got a Liberty t-shirt. I'm gonna be wearing my Liberty t-shirt in Indiana, but then I will be buying Caitlin Clark merchandise that hopefully isn't made by a certain company at that game.
Perfect.
Yes, hopefully there's a Homage Caitlin Clark I can buy. All right, Caitlin Clark. She declares the WNBA Draft ahead of her senior night, where her Hawkeyes beat Ohio State, getting some revenge for an earlier loss this season. She is going to be playing for the Indiana Fever, barring something just insane, galaxy brain, whatever. But I'll ask you this: how good, how impactful can she be as a rookie?
Yeah. I wasn't sure what order to do this in because obviously now that she's, just the top scorer in the history of college basketball, check that off the list. There's
just a light day work.
Yeah, just like the culmination of, a whole life's work. And now she's not even a pro. And there's that coming up for her. But there's also like the rest of March. So I was like, do we talk about that? Do we, but I think what she does in March will be ultimately a footnote because we're talking about a player who I think the question with her as a pro is going to be, is she, and this might sound almost like condescending or something, but like, is she only revolutionary or is she also great? You know what I mean? Like James Harden.
I don't think I know. I don't think I know what you mean.
Right? Wouldn't you say James Harden changed basketball?
Yeah, I don't know if that was. Okay. Harden just like. I think the comp for her that I think if you're trying to make a comp for like a revolutionary player, I think it's like this is sort of blasphemous because of who he is, but it's like probably Curry to me.
Well, yeah, of course that's the comp for her. That's the one that always gets thrown out. But he is also great. So that's what I'm saying. Those are the two poles here, right? Like, because I guess it's about how does she round out her game? Does she have to round out her game? Does the pro talent level and I would say increased level of physicality and athleticism that she's going to face on a night-to-night basis, not that she's never faced that in college. She obviously beat South Carolina last year, but does that force her to adapt? Does that open up maybe holes in her game that we're not seeing right now? I'm not doing this just to pick nits and be ridiculous, but I guess that's kind of the question because the floor is already like, I think you and I threw it around already. Like she could be an all-star this year. And that's not as rare in the W as I think people might think because I saw that like Sue Bird said it and a lot of people were gasping and debating it. It's like it's pretty common for the number one overall pick to make the All-Star team in the WNBA, but they could make the playoffs. We talked about like if they could have been an Elena Delle Donne pursuer to try to like, could they maybe even make a real run at the title with Aaliyah Boston, Rookie of the Year from last year, and a vet like Delle Donne and Clark? Like those are like the sky is already the limit. The floor is already so high. She's going to be in the conversation of the best stuff going on in the WNBA immediately. So I guess that's why I go to the kind of like up in the like the ethereal kind of like take a hit off of a bong and start talking about hoops types of perspective on it. Like, and that's where I come down is like, is she going to be just game changing, or are we about to watch the beginning of like one of the best basketball careers ever? And I do think it could go either way. I think she could be somebody who makes a few all WNBA teams, is one of the best players in the league for a while, but isn't ultimately the GOAT like it feels like she's about to be right now. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think what I'm really excited to see, Brendan, more than anything else with her and how good she can be as a rookie is how she's able to bend the game as a rookie. Her superpower in college a lot of the time to me is that she is willing to just take the game as it presents itself to her. She threw a pass against Ohio State on Sunday that I, in a group text with a couple of buddies that were watching the game, and they're Buckeyes, so they're A, they're losers, and B, they didn't see it the same way I did. I thought this pass was like absolutely brilliant because she's one of the few players, men or women, alive that actually plays their head up all the time and sees things as they're progressing in front of her in real time. That is a skill you just can't teach. That is something that I feel like translates. But how much does it translate? How much does her ability to do some of that, the passing stuff on its own, how much is that immediately just translate? Or is there like a rookie quarterback thing where it takes her some time to acclimate? The physicality is part of it. And then also the shot making, like her ability and willingness to take shots from everywhere is a real thing. But does a different coach who hasn't built an entire program around her, does they try to rein that in because Aaliyah Boston is in the post and like you want to feature her in a real way because she's also really freaking good? Like there's just structural things that I don't think we know what they look like. I would lean, I think, Brendan, more towards like we're at the start of something magnificent, because every time she gets a chance, I think, to do something and hit another level, it feels like she does it and just sustains it. There might just be like a transition that where maybe that it's unclear to me what that looks like, but that's where I think this comes down. It's like maybe year one's a little slow, it's a little bit slow burn, but she's really good, and you still see her. You see her once she gets her feet fully settled, then she starts bending the game in the way that we know that's just how she plays, kind of naturally.
Yeah, I think the question will be within what you're saying is can she speed it up, right? Can she speed the game up permanently? Like can she recreate, coincidentally, or I guess in a cool twist of fate, like fortunately you could say, with the fact that they're both in Indiana, can she do with the Fever what Halliburton was doing with the Pacers for the first couple months of this season before his hamstring injury, where it just felt like, okay, we've seen the 7 seconds or less Suns or whatever other thing you want to say. We've seen John Morant, but like we've never seen this level of just the gas is down. You're playing Crazy Taxi in an arcade on a basketball court. And that is going to be what opens up so much for her. That's what I think makes her special and relatively unguardable, is that she makes it an open court game at all times, right? And some of the passing that she's able to do, I think the way that she, like, we talk about gravity for like Steph in the half court running off ball, or post players obviously have gravity because they demand a double team, and that just literally pulls an individual defender away from their man and you can just rotate from there. But she creates gravity in the full court. She has like 47-foot gravity because she's capable of pulling up on a dime at a full sprint, and so you have to be aware of that. And the amount of players that she just finds wide open cutting to the basket in transition because multiple defenders are trying to take her at the timeline is insane, And so can she continue to do that? I think that's going to be the big question for me. But she's a fine finisher. I think the past couple seasons have been pretty identical for her junior and senior years. From a stats standpoint, I think their offensive rating when she's on the court is a little better this year. Maybe you could attribute that to some little stuff subtle things we don't see. But her turnovers are down. That was a big nitpick from her early on. She still has some individual games where they're high, but on the whole, it's not as much of a problem. Her interior efficiency improved. I kind of think we know what it's going to look like. I think the style and how she's forced to play is going to be a question, but the point you made about her head being up, I think leads me to the thing that ultimately would lead me to say she is going to be able to just kind of keep the arc going up rather than having to change too much, is when you think about Kelsey Plum, who obviously broke the record once upon a time herself, plays somewhat of a similar style, or Sabrina Ionescu, who kind of the pull-up 3 game was what separated her and the transition game and everything else. She's taller than both of those players. I think she's a better athlete than both of those players, and I think she has a better handle than all of them. I think Sabrina's handle is what limits her as a player. The reason she's kind of had to become a shooter specialist rather than a real point guard. And I think Kelsey's just small. But Caitlin Clark doesn't have any of those issues. I'm not saying she has no limitations. Obviously, her defense is going to be a problem, but being taller than everybody is sort of just it breaks the math on all of it. So I think that is when I really start to think about it. I'm you can't really fuck with the fact that she has 2 inches on most of the players that are going to be guarding her, So that's kind of my thing. And I think that the Fever are going to be a real team. I think they were already pretty good down the stretch last year, and I think if you're asking me how good they could be as a team, if she does kind of hit the ground running like we're expecting and really feel like a force, a star right away, you're talking about a team that maybe we're saying is a dark horse to win a playoff series next year and just be that great right away.
I think too, Brendan, the thing I think she can do and will demand if she's as good as I think we will be, she can make the Fever a real organization. She can make them a serious entity. She can make them... Caitlin Clark can force the Fever to evolve. She can do that if things hit. And then you look at it's her, it's Leah Boston, it's all of that. But if she's good right away, if she hits the ground running, if she's just impactful and contributes to winning and isn't just putting up stats in a real way, then I think we're in a position where she's going to make the Fever, who have not been a good organization, really, haven't drafted well, haven't won much, haven't, I think, been taken very seriously within the WNBA circle in a lot of ways.
Since
she can be
retired.
Yes. Yeah, and in recent memory, the Lauren, there's a lot of mistakes. There's a lot of things that just haven't gone right for them and dumb things they've done. She can demand that they can be better. As much as any one player can change the organization, she can be that kind of force. That's what's on the table here to me. That's the most interesting part about this. Do I think the Fever, if she's great next year, can win the title? No, I think the Aces might just win it again because they're that damn good. And we'll see what the Liberty deal will see if there's someone else pops up. But can she get them on a path to, in a year, in 2 years, can she force the Fever to get on a trajectory where they're on the path to get there? That is what feels like on the table for me, on the table for her as a rookie for me.
Yeah, and I would say to your point about, coaching and whatnot, Chrissy Sides did a pretty good job with them last year, and I think the fact that she had Aaliyah Boston kind of messing around on the perimeter a little bit offensively and turned Alyssa Smith into a kind of 3-level scoring threat, got, I would say, a lot more out of that team considering its talent than I personally expected. I think that has to give you optimism, right? There are old school coaches. I mean, everywhere, but I would say especially in the WNBA, which is a league that's, I kind of like to think about it as maybe it's, especially if we're calling Caitlin kind of the Steph of the league, this portion of the W's history maybe is sort of like a decade or 12 years ago in the NBA. They're kind of on the upswing of the three-point stuff in a way the NBA is fully already kind of evolved with. So she could have run into a team that would have held her back. There are definitely coaches like that. So, but I don't think this is going to be one. And the talent's already there. Like, she's not the first draft pick of this rebuild, which I think is, to your point, she's going to kind of force the hand here. Really anytime Herb Simon wants to sell the damn organization would be nice too. Just as a side note, get in on the money stuff. Or Herb, all your rich guy peers are doing it. You might as well, join them, get a couple bill or whatever they would get. But yeah, I think that this is going to be every bit what we expect based on how she's performed at Iowa, which brings us to that. I know we're not huge, women's college hoops heads and knowing the 7 seed in every bracket and all that, Chris, but I watch this team and I watch the other top teams. I think South Carolina feels really dominant, but I would have said that last year too. I wouldn't be blown away if they won this thing. Would you?
I think things would have to go correct for them. I think the Ohio State win for them on Sunday is kind of an example of that. That was a real confluence of things that I think broke in their favor. It was not a great game for Ohio State. Cody McMahon was excellent in the first matchup between those two teams, and she just didn't really make her presence felt in that game in a way that I thought really translated. Ohio State got a lot out of J.C. Sheldon in particular in that game, but Ohio State just wasn't quite as sharp. And there was a window open for, I think, a pretty imperfect Iowa team to then capitalize because Caitlin Clark had capitalized and some of her shooters got hot. There's a way they could do it. I think it's certainly going to require some. I think ultimately, it comes down to, can Caitlin Clark just have some more brilliant moments and end her college career kind of just doing that kind of stuff? Because I think athletically, which we've talked about, I think talent-wise against the teams that are better than them in the standings right now, I think they're going to be underdogs, and I think would deserve to be so. But I wouldn't be shocked, but I think it would be something of an upset if they beat some of these teams. I think even Ohio State, a team that they lost earlier this year, I think Ohio State on most nights has probably looked like the better team in the aggregate than Iowa has, aside from Caitlin Clark being the best player in women's college basketball, and between those two teams, obviously.
Yeah, I know the big thing with them this year was that Monica Zanano was finally leaving, but I think Stelke is good. She's a legit two-way player, and I think Gabby Marshall provides another scorer for them in a way that gives me some optimism that it's not just Caitlin having to do everything, which I think could have been the fear if some of those other players had not stepped up. I don't think they're the favorite. I don't think they should be. LSU has a ton of talent. I think a lot of teams have 2 options late in games as scorers, if not more, in a way that Iowa just kind of can't match, even if those other players, again, have been impressive. And their defense is just not very good. So, look, it's not likely, but, if you were to tell me that one big win like what they did to South Carolina last year goes their way and they're right back in the Final Four, which, obviously anything can happen in any game. That's the point of the NCAA tournament. But especially once you're in the Final Four, you're right there. It wouldn't blow me away. But again, I kind of think maybe is it stupid to just say that that's kind of almost insignificant here when we're talking about the year of Caitlin Clark that we're early on in? I'm sure it matters a lot to her, but it's not what I'm necessarily worried about. I'm let's just get to May. I want to see her as a pro.
Yeah, I think this is just the last thing she hasn't accomplished in college. This is the big thing that is left for her to be done. The real get that big hardware. I think as a competitor, I think that's something she would want. I think too. I think the era of women's college basketball, Brendan, is different. I think you could even speak to this better than I can. But I think we're in a position where, if you look at the greats that came before, and it's really Asia Wilson also, obviously won, but Brianna Stewart won a ton in college. Diana Taurasi won a ton in college. Like, it's a lot of UConn.
Anyone
but then
that went
a lot
to
of
UConn from like 2000 to 2015, you could just list.
Yeah. But a lot of the greats who then were greats in the W have in their resume like serial winners in college, right? Like that is just kind of on their resume. That is kind of changing as there's more talent, there's more parity. You have other programs outside of stores that are being built. Transfer portal is a big deal. You know, South Carolina is the program right now, but you have lots of other really good programs around the country right now, Iowa being one of them. It's not as easy, I think, to get some of that hardware, and I don't think it's as necessary anymore, ultimately, just in terms of like how we understand it. But that's kind of the one thing, if you look at her compared to the other players, she's going to, I think, try to reach the heights of the Stewies, the Asia. Like, that's the one thing that she just doesn't have if you're putting her on the same path as some of those players. That's the one thing really missing. And I mean, I think Sabrina is kind of the same thing, where she obviously didn't hit the highs as a pro, or hasn't yet, but like didn't quite get there in college to some degree because
lost out on one of the opportunities. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's fair. It totally, like, legacy wise, historically, it is going to be relevant. And I don't want to make it sound like if they were to lose in the second round, I would just move on.
Fraud.
We're expecting
you're coming in hot.
A deep run.
You're coming in hot like at the first take segment, and when they lose in the second round, be like, actually. We need Rickea Jackson for the number one pick.
Exactly. It has been hilarious to see this story rise to the level of having to be talked about on those types of shows, and just like the complete unawareness of how or what to say. I think
he came up with the top thing, but it's like
said he would punch somebody in the face who said she was the greatest college player of all time. It's just like, we don't need Jim Boeheim to talk about this.
Yeah, we don't. I don't need lots of people's takes on it when they're not like watching or caring about this at all.
Yeah. But yeah, so I mean, look, I'm expecting a deep run. I guess I'm just saying the difference to me, if they were to lose in the Elite Eight versus winning a championship, is ultimately kind of irrelevant. And I guess me personally, I just was sort of looking at last year as their year to get the upset that they did, get so close. Obviously, LSU more than earned that, but maybe that's just coloring my view. But I'm excited. I mean, she's going to give us many more memories in that Iowa uniform in the next month or so. The Big Ten's great, so even this conference tournament's going to be pretty awesome this week. And we'll just see what she has in store for us, and then obviously get a whole summer watching her do her thing in the pros after that.
Let me ask you one last thing about Caitlin Clark, Brendan. Do you, based on what we've seen for her with tickets in college, I think one of the things that's going to be most fascinating is just to see like what this means for WNBA ticket sales with her in her city. I kind of just feel like with the Fever in particular, this is for them just going to be like such a huge like injection in what we know is a big basketball state, is a big basketball culture in that state. I feel like this can really like invigorate the W in a real way too, and I'm curious. And I don't. She doesn't deserve like all the credit. I don't think she would have asked for all the credit, but I do kind of think this is going to be a really cool thing to just see how she is a catalyst for continued growth of the league at a time where it's obviously like it's in a real growth. It's in a real like leveling up kind of moment.
Well, that circles back to what I was saying at the beginning, right? And like to take it back to the show we did when the WNBA lottery happened, and we agreed. As much as we wanted to maybe see her in LA, or I personally might have wanted to see her in Phoenix, or Seattle was a deserving franchise considering the legacy they have, that it's in the best interest of all basketball fans and the leagues that, like, I guess you don't employ a team that house these teams for an Indiana franchise to be really successful. Like, you know, far be it from us to like shit on a franchise just because they're not historically relevant or whatever. And if they can become that in the W, and like I mentioned a minute ago, they certainly were for a while. I mean, they had routine finals appearances, and Tamika Catchings, a lot of people would tell you she's the best professional women's basketball player ever, you know? So it's there for them. there's a fan base there, and if they can turn that out and make it consistent and run the business side well, great. Add another one to the list. I'm all for that. I just look at the Pacers in particular and worry that the cheapness will hurt them. But as far as she goes, and we're a long way from them capping her or whatever, she's going to lift them, like you said, much more than anyone has to worry about.
Yeah.
But
have the fever core. Caitlin Clark is going to be I'm already annoyed by that.
You know, we're a few years away from those conversations, but it's like, that's what I was saying a minute ago, is the legacy she's going to have, I think, is already pretty obvious considering the popularity she's bringing into the league. She's going to be part of what revolutionizes the economics of this thing. It's just a matter of, does she also win like 4 championships? I think that's the question I was trying to ask at the beginning, right?
Yeah.
Because if Steph just had like the beginning of his career and like that big night at MSG early on, but didn't like beat the Celtics in 2022 after KD left, he still would have been bulletproof. It's just now he's like a fucking legend. You know, that's I think the conversation we're having. Those are crazy things to put on her right away, but I think we're going to already start to see it because you know right away, I think, with players like this.
Yeah, even if it doesn't totally crystallize right away, you can see the signs of it starting to bubble up. All right, let's move on. Last topic of the day. Brendan, the Boston Celtics winners, as we're recording this, of 11 straight games, including multiple 50-plus point drubbings, including one of the Warriors. No one in basketball is playing better than the Celtics right now. So are the Celtics, Brendan, just staring us in the face as the title favorite right now? Or should we just look at them as the favorite to win the whole thing?
I mean, not to, I would never take a victory lap, but I think we did this segment like a month in where I was like, Celtics are the field. It just felt that way pretty early on to me. In the East, I think, was the context back then. I'm not ready to say that for the whole league. I think the West has a lot of teams. I'm certainly still there in the East. I'm not backing off that at all, but I think so. It would be kind of crazy to say anything else right now, right?
Yeah. The confidence they're playing with right now, the intention they're playing with right now, even just like honestly the Jalen Brown like having fun at the fact that they left him open and like teasing that like speaks to just like I think how darn locked in they are right now, how deep they are at this point with all the size and switchability at the guard spots they have.
That's the thing that I'm glad it kind of jumped out to you too, but it's like for a team that was already this far ahead and has such a track record for, close to a decade now. Jalen is in year 9, I believe, or 8, and they've been good his whole career. To even care enough to come out and like smash teams out of the All-Star break like this, that in and of itself says a lot to me. That they just
it tells you
wanted to prove this and like came out with the requisite energy to do it.
Yeah, 100%. It tells you there's intention. It tells you that there's some venom behind what they're putting out. Danny Chow had this in his blog at The Ringer when I was reading earlier today, Brendan, before we recorded. The Celtics right now have a point differential over this 11-game winning streak of plus 243. That is the largest point differential over an 11-game sample in league history. Mm-hmm. They are literally just shellacking teams at all stretch of the imagination. And like the post-All-Star break NBA is a weird place. It just is. Teams they have more games crammed in. They're looking ahead of the playoffs. They're thinking about health. Obviously, now we've had this rash of injuries in the NBA that has kind of, I think, disrupted some things in slight ways. Boston is just unfazed by all of it. Like they're healthy. The only guys not playing for them or aren't listed as active for them are the guys that just don't matter for them, like the J.D. Davidsons and the Jordan Walshes of the world. They are just playing with like an obscene level of confidence and an obscene level of intent that, like, even if Milwaukee is showing some signs of being really interesting, and they play in a couple weeks, and I can't wait for that game. The Heat are revving up, that the Knicks are still around, that the Cavs are still around, that like there are some good teams in the East that they're going to have to combat. It really just feels like I'm with you. I think this is Boston's Eastern Conference to lose, barring just maybe some of the things that have plagued them in the past rear their ugly head again, and we end up being in the same place with them. But this does feel different to me. This does feel like a Celtics team that has a little more weight behind what's thrown around here. And that, to me, bodes really, really well for them as we go the rest of the way.
So I have a couple questions with them. One is about Brad Stevens.
Okay.
Because it kind of got me thinking, right? I think he's going to win Executive of the Year.
Thought you're going to be like Joe Mazzulla hanging out with Pep. Is he getting the Pep rub? I don't know if you saw this.
No, I did not. But let me just tell you what I mean with Brad Stevens. I think he's going to win Executive of the Year. Would you agree? I mean, if
which
Dame
like is one of
trade
those
had gone
awards.
better, maybe the Bucks would. But as of now, I think it's going to be Stevens.
Yeah. I mean, probably just because you could. But even though it's like because I mean, Porzingis and Drew Holiday are two of the most consequential moves that have been made in the NBA in the last 12 months. That's your argument.
I mean, and he did them in the same season. So yeah, I think it kind of feels like it's his to lose. So there's one element of the question I'm about to ask that is a little dicey. It might not hold up. But how many people in NBA history have been in conversation as the best coach in college basketball, the best coach in the NBA, and the best executive in the NBA, all the same person in one career, let alone, I mean, he's done it in like just over 10 years. He's checked all those boxes. The best coach
Brendon,
in the NBA one is the part that might not work out, but
I mean,
I'm
wondering. I'm just wondering if you're asking me in a roundabout way, if you're the GM of an expansion team and you have your choice of any NBA player or Brad Stevens, who do you choose? I'm just wondering if that's what you're trying to ask me here. Shout out, Chris. Shout out to one of the all-time tweets, honestly. But no, like, so, to your point.
Yeah, that became a meme. So obviously, I don't know how many people really thought of him as the best coach in the NBA.
No.
At any point,
I can tell you, like,
he was at least up there, right?
Yeah, and to your point, like I think he has just like accomplished a ton. It's very clear that he knows basketball just like at a level that is on par with some of the best in the league. I mean, we don't get these kind of like Brendan, sometimes I wish NBA insiders would do some of the things that like Hollywood insiders do at times, which is like give us like the power polls of like who's actually the most powerful people in an industry and the most like well-respected thought leaders within these industries. And I would venture to guess that Brad Stevens is probably on like the top 5 of those lists right now on the men's side of the game. It's like him and Spo and Ty Lue and Pat Riley, and it's like that's kind of like in the inner circle. He has to be, considering everything he's done, everything he's seen. Certainly like some mistakes along the way, but I think one of the most brilliant things about it for him is that he's willing to evolve and he's willing to push things in different directions when he feels the need to. I think, Brendan, lots of other general managers, if you want to go back to the summer and in his case as executive of the year, like wouldn't have traded Marcus Smart. Would have just been like, yeah, like that's a culture guy. That's like the heart of the team. We can't lose that guy. They've been better without him. And it's not that like they got rid of him and got better because they got rid of Marcus Smart. It's that they saw trading Marcus Smart as a catalyst to evolve and get the team better. And then also, by the way, they're in good position as to win and get Drew Holiday from their vis-a-vis their biggest rival in the East. Like, he has been so opportunistic in a way that I think a lot of GMs should look at and say, you can't be at this NBA in particular. I think you can't be willing to just sit there and let stuff happen. You kind of have to go out and make your own luck, make your own fortune. He's absolutely done that. So yeah, I think he's absolutely got to be up there as one of the most respected people in the league right now.
So that brings me to the other thing. Is it fair to say the Holiday thing kind of fell in their lap?
Yes, but I think
like
too,
we would think about it differently if the Lillard saga didn't go the way that it did, and then they don't land Holiday. Like the version of this team that just has Porzingis, but then still has an injured Robert Williams and whatever's going on with Malcolm Brogdon, that probably ends up feeling a little different to us. But I guess you can't take it away from them.
No, but I mean, but Brendan, I think even on top of that, the fact that they sent 2 firsts for Drew Holiday, who they essentially are going to have to pay after this year, and weren't phased by, they went for it. Not every team would have done that. I don't think every team in the league in that position would have done that, and I think when teams actively go all in and push their chips in and pursue something like this, I think they deserve credit for actually doing it. And they're one of the few teams that I think actually would have had the gumption to really go through with the Holiday trade. I don't think every team would have done that.
No, I don't think so either. But the end result is, to me, their defense is better now than it was before. Even though we thought of that as maybe the thing they were like when they just had made the Porzingis trade. It was like, okay, they've acknowledged that their best player isn't going to be as good, and I want to get to him in a second, as the other team's best players. So they have to create a better infrastructure overall. So they're going to go get Porzingis, who's a little bit of a post option, another shooter, and whatever, so that they can commit more resources to that end of the floor, and they're going to take a step back on defense. But then because the Holiday thing lands in their lap the way that it did, now I actually feel like they're better on both ends. They're just like substantially overall, no matter what way you want to slice it, I think a better team. And that's what makes me feel like they can get over the hump, because it's not just, can these guys get it done? It's, can these guys and their 2 awesome new teammates who have raise their ceiling substantially get it done? And that's why I don't have any hesitation saying yes, because the version of this team we saw struggle to finish off the Warriors or get embarrassed by Miami last year, like, that's not what this team is. They're flying around on defense. Holiday is just as valuable as he's ever been. I think there's an offensive level he could hit in the playoffs if he needed to, that they just haven't had to ask him to do. And Porzingis, if he can stay healthy, is awesome. I mean, he's been perfect for them. You and I both thought he should have been an all-star and everything else. So, yeah, I mean, you're talking about a team that's been a mainstay in the conference finals getting pretty substantially better. There's no reason, like, just kind of the trajectory of league history or whatever you want to say, there's no reason they shouldn't feel like a heavyweight, feel like a favorite.
And 2, they're at the point where I just think they are going to be the thing that everyone in the playoffs has to react to. There's really only like 2 teams I can think of that I don't think have to like kind of adjust themselves to the Celtics in a real way, and that's the Nuggets and that's the Clippers. And the Clippers is because of their personnel, and then it's the Nuggets because it's the Nuggets. And everyone else, I think, is having to play the Celtics game. Like, one of the real bummers for me this week, Brendan, is I really wanted to see what the Cavs at full strength would have done against Boston, just to see how they problem solve for it. Now, I'm not going to get to see it in that game. The most exciting thing about Cavs Celtics on Tuesday is it going to be that the Kelsey brothers are going to be there drinking a shit ton of beer, because it's Kelsey Brothers bobblehead night at that game. That's the most exciting thing that will be happening at that game on Cleveland on Tuesday. A game that was flexed on national television. Very tough for the NBA that they just, like, no one's healthy. It's very dumb. We've talked about that before. Every team is going to have to problem solve and panic and find solutions for them. That is where, like, I was joking about this before. And it's not so much, I think, that Missoula is like a coach on the level of Pep Guardiola. But like what Pep does and what like his teams have done, and what the very, very best teams in soccer do, and very few NBA teams do for structural reasons, I think more than anything else, is that they just kind of, like, the very best soccer teams like Man City dictate like a style of play, and then just like bend certain things to fit personnel, and like can swap things in and out and do different things on a given night when they need to. Boston can kind of just be whatever it needs to be in that same way. They're overwhelming in certain areas, but then they also can just kind of do what they need to do and be malleable if certain things just need to go a certain way in a given game. Like that, they are, like, I think Tatum, to his credit, at times like doesn't feel like a need in a way other stars do of try to score a bunch of points early. He's kind of willing to kind of let the game kind of flow, and then he can come in later and kind of be the hammer on top of a start that already gets them out way ahead.
Yeah, you and I debated. I think that was one of the things when we first had a conversation like this early in the season. You were kind of saying you felt like he was different. I was saying, like, show me where in the stats or what part of his game. And maybe we kind of agree to disagree, but I think it definitely shows up now. So maybe that's you taking a victory lap a little bit, because like his drives per game are down a little bit, but he's more efficient in terms of field goal percentage and fewer turnovers on those drives. He's improved his pull-up shooting percentage, three-point shooting percentage by 4 percentage points. So it's gone from sub 30 to he's hitting a third of them. And you might want that to be higher, but contested pull-up threes, most of his pull-up threes are contested. Most of everybody's pull-up threes are contested. That's a pretty good number. 33 is fine. And then he's now, at this point in the year, with a pretty substantial sample, he's doubled his post-up frequency and maintained the efficiency. So I do think he's kind of growing out his offensive game in a way. It's like, yeah, you could look at him. He's 6'8", 6'9", cut. Feels like he should be able to just be LeBron James or whatever. Downhill, not LeBron, but, that level of physicality you would like to see. You'd like to see him try to be LeBron and get 70% of the way there, and you'll take that. But he's not going to be that kind of player. But I think that he's still developing out in a way that you feel like, yeah, maybe he's 5% better in a big, close game in a deep playoff round than he was last year. And when everything else around him is so much better too, again, you start to see the case for, yeah, it's not common for a team to win a title when their best player is maybe the 7th or 8th best player in the league. But when everything else clicks like this, it does happen. It's not that big of a fluke. Dirk Nowitzki won a title in his 30s, and obviously the 04 Pistons everybody talks about, and there's plenty of Kawhi in 2019. Like, maybe by the end of that we thought of him as the best player in the NBA, but probably not at the beginning of that season, right? So it happens, and it happens because all the other stuff lifts that player and creates that structure, and I think that's what we're seeing with the Celtics.
Can I ask you? I want to ask you one last thing about this, about Tatum, and I think we can end with this question. Do you think there's a world in the future where he actually could win an MVP?
No. I don't even have an elaboration there. I don't think that his production is going to be at the level that it would need to be. Okay. I think that they've already built the roster in a way that kind of creates a built-in argument against him. We're never going to see, at least anytime soon, the version of this team that's like Tatum and some guys. I think we all kind of assume we know how that would look. Maybe he would surprise us, but I don't think we're even going to see it. So for him to win it with this level of talent around him, he would have to do substantially more. I mean, he's at 3.7 assists per game, not even a 2-to-1 assist-to-turnover ratio. He only shoots 35-ish% from deep the past few years. That's something that I think gets kind of lost because he takes so many pull-up threes. So that's not really great. I think he's a good but not like elite of elite defender. So it's like without the passing, without the top-tier three-point shooting, top-tier defense, I just don't think he's really going to be there. He's just going to be the best player on a really good team. And I think the biggest question is that good enough to outduel a Giannis or whoever else in the postseason much more than MVP votes? Do you feel like he will? Was that the thrust?
No, I don't. I've kind of got to a place with him where like I have twice kind of thought the MVP surge was happening. I thought this last year a little bit, and then I thought it this year a little bit, and I just think that I don't think it's ever going to be a thing. I think he's going to be widely considered very good, one of the best players in the league, but the Lukas of the world, the Victor Wembanyama's of the world, I think there's just a class of guys that are going to be seen as ahead of him, and he might end up winning more titles than some of those guys because he's in a really good organization. But I don't think he will necessarily get an MVP award. Maybe like once, but I think things would have to break us. It would just have to take it have to be like kind of a, I don't mean this badly, but it would kind of be like a Derrick Rose wins it kind of year kind of thing.
Yeah, I just think the league is too deep at this point that a good litmus test is like, will he ever be a top 3 player in the NBA? And if he's not right now, is he going to elevate his status in the league as he gets in close to and into his 30s? Probably not. It usually goes the other direction. So if he was going to win one, it would probably be very, very soon, and I don't think anyone would bet on that.
Speaking of awards, that's going to be it for the show. But our next show is going to be our NBA awards check-in as we get into March. So MVP, Defensive Player of the Year, Sixth Man of the Year, Coach of the Year, Executive of the Year, all of that and more later this week on the Just Basketball Show. I've been Chris Manning. That's been Brendon Kleen. Please follow us on YouTube. Subscribe on your podcast platform of choice. All of that great stuff and more. Check us out on social media everywhere, TikTok, Instagram, etc. Enjoy the hoops. We'll talk to you later this week.